Hi everyone. Hello. Welcome to the ROC Game Dev workshop. That's not what you're here for. You're in the wrong room. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam. I am the workshop coordinator here at ROC Game Dev. Normally I would have slides up, but I didn't want to mess with a third laptop up here, so I'm just going to be referencing them and you can listen. Oh. All right. So who am I? I'm Sam, again, workshop coordinator. If you're interested in giving or have a recommendation for a workshop, I would be the person to talk to. And what is ROC Game Dev? Workshops are hosted here on the last Wednesday of every month. ROC Game Dev exists essentially to create a community for hobbyists, for students, just for people interested in game development from around Rochester and from visiting areas. Feel free to bring your friends. We have other events, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But essentially, you come here for the workshops. We will have a rotating guest speaker every month who will give a talk on a topic of their choice. Free pizza and drinks, obviously. If you haven't gotten any, please feel free. A list of full events and all of our info can be found on our Facebook page, as well as rocgamedev.com. We're also on Twitter and Discord. So just a couple quick announcements before we really dive into the talk. Our February workshop, which the date will be announced very soon, is all about source control with Git for all levels. So no matter if you are a starter or someone who's been using Git for years and has been using source control, there will be a whole workshop on how you can learn and improve. As for other upcoming events that I would normally announce during this time, our revised schedule is going to be announced next week, and for that, I will bump it over to Rob.
So we recently revised our schedule of events. We tried a lot of new events in the last half of 2019. Some were great, some not so much. So what we want to do moving forward is have 4 consistent events a month, same day of the month, and we'll be announcing that schedule next week. So then you know, okay, it's always the third Thursday. Okay, it's always the first Wednesday. There's never any confusion about which day and that event. January was a little weird because first kind of pushed everything out, so that was a little bit of a different month. But moving forward, we will be utilizing the schedule. Rob was for the rest of the year.
Yep, and we'll probably be pretty vocal about that whole change once it comes out. So keep your eyes on Twitter, Discord, all of our locations if you want to keep up with that. And do you also want to touch on the relocation?
Yeah, so this workshop will be moving downtown. The next one will be hosted downtown at our space. If you haven't been there, it's in the Assembly Building. The directions are on the website. We will be uploading better wayfinding, if you will, on how to best get there. In the past, people have carpooled, and one of our main intentions for moving it downtown is having more of a central location for our workshop. While having our workshop periodically is great, it is out of the way for some people. So we want to try that. We will revisit it. You know, if we get an overwhelming response that people hate having it downtown, maybe we'll revisit where we have it. But we want to give this a try. So moving forward, all workshops will be at the downtown location. The general meetup is happening next week. We'll stay here. We're not moving.
And to be clear, the space, there is a payment kind of tier plan for utilization of the space, but the workshops will still remain free and open to the public, so you can still attend even if you aren't a patron and part of the ROC Game Dev space.
Yeah, any of the public events that are held at the space are open to everyone.
Yep.
So any questions, let me know.
Yep. So like I said, if you want to host a workshop, I love booking people out in advance. Which gives you plenty of time to design your workshop and me plenty of time to plan accordingly. I would love to chat with you either tonight after tonight's workshop, or you can DM me. I am Sam Camerata on Discord and Sam Catamaran on Twitter. You'll find me active in the ROC Game Dev Discord, so I'm not hard to find. Tonight's workshop is obviously Kickstarter, Building Your Crowd, with Dan and Nick, who will introduce themselves shortly. And with that, I think I'm ready to hand it off to you. Again, feel free to grab pizza and drinks, and there is a sign-in sheet next to the pizza. Please do sign in next time you're over there or at the end.
Hey guys, how's it going? Hey. Developers. No, we're not gonna do that. But yeah, I mean, this is called Building Your Crowd, and we're going to touch on a lot of that because that's a big part of Kickstarter, but we'll also be touching on foundations of building your campaign and that kind of thing too. So we'll have a lot of, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions at the end, but also feel free to raise your hand if you have questions as we go along, okay? Cool? Cool. All right. I'm Nick, game designer, sometimes publisher, but I don't really enjoy publishing, so that's what I started collaborating with Dan, finally after knowing him for like 10 years, not collaborating. But Eternal Dynasty, Hero Brigade, Adventure Tactics. I'm looking at my slides, like these are my games, I should know, right? And we've done pretty well on Kickstarter. We've been there, we've been in the trenches, we've run multiple campaigns. Like between Dan and I, we have over a dozen campaigns now.
Yeah, I think 13 or 14 between us. Yeah.
So we've gone through it. So if you have any questions, we're here. Like between the two of us, we have 5 kids. So we're not here that often, but you may have seen us like once or twice a year and at the local conventions.
And we're super active online.
Yes.
So if you want to reach out there, we respond pretty good there. It's just like
that's a lot easier.
To events is a lot harder.
That's a lot easier way to reach us. But we do want to make ourselves available to the local community, which is why we're here tonight too. So if you guys are interested in this, please don't hesitate to reach out, okay?
All right, so as he said, he's Nick. I'm Dan. I own 2 different board game publishing companies, Letzring Games and Galactic Raptor. So between them, I've published, I think, 10 games, and I've done a localization, co-publish, and run 10 Kickstarters. And so,
$250,000.
I've done, a lot of money doing that, a lot of years doing it. I've been doing it for about 5 years now. And I also host a podcast called Breaking Into Board Games. So it's good advice even if you're just, into in-game development. We have on the podcast a developer, a publisher, and a designer, so that we kind of talk about all the facets of game development, rulebook editing, and things that I think kind of are global to all sorts of game design concepts. So it's really a great podcast if you're looking at getting into the industry. I also published a blog a few years ago, all on Kickstarter advice as well. I kind of stopped publishing it about 2 years ago just because I got too busy, but there's about 20 posts all on Kickstarter advice as well. So like I said, I have a lot of experience doing it, and I'm happy to share that knowledge and be there as a resource for all of you as well.
Yep. All right.
So one of my blogs on my post on my Kickstarter blog I used to do, I just compiled a ton of data from a lot of Kickstarter campaigns, and I wanted to see when a game is successfully funded, when does the funding come? Is it in the first few hours? Usually with Kickstarter campaigns, you see a huge spike in the first 2 days, a huge spike at the end, and fluff in the middle. And people always estimated it was 30, 30, 30, 33% in the beginning, 33 through all the middle, no matter how long you made your campaign, and then 33% at the end. And I was like, is that really true? So I took, it was over 200 campaigns, and I just collected data from it and saw how much funding it got in those time periods. And it turned out in the first 2 days, they got about 31% of their total funding. No matter whether they just funded or they really, really funded well, the average was 31% of that funding came right at the beginning in the first 48 hours. The middle of the campaign got about 45%, and then the end wasn't as good as about a third, it was about 23%. But what that really meant was you have to have a strong first 2 days if you want to successfully fund. And really you have to have at least 30% of your goal. So if it's your first campaign and you don't think you're gonna way overfund, you need to be sure you're gonna fund 30% of your goal in those first 2 days. So that's our main question.
Yep. Got to get funding in the first 48 hours. So this is the question you get asked all the time, right? So that's where there's the silly comment at the bottom there. And Dan has a few approaches. This is your MailChimp.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of people think when you go to Kickstarter and you launch it, a lot of people come from Kickstarter, and that's just really not true. People do find you, but usually people who just randomly find you, a lot of times it's already because you're a successful campaign or they have faith in the campaign you're running. But you're not just going to get 30% of your campaign funded from random strangers that you've never interacted with and know nothing about your game until that day. So you have to bring that audience. And so for me, I've looked at some of my past campaigns, and usually about 50% of my first day funding comes from my newsletter. So it's really important. That's my community, and this has been true whether it was my second game or my 10th game. So it's not like, oh, I built an audience and then it took me years to get there. It was like, I always, from the start, had about 50% of my funding coming from my audience. as my audience grew, my campaigns grew and did better. But it was always, I had to bring a lot of my subscribers there from the beginning.
Right. And just because it's like newsletter, don't like roll your eyes like this is not 1990. People actually sign up for and follow those. Like, you know, your generation is like, you know, we have ad blockers installed and we don't sign up for newsletters, but just kidding.
Yeah, I didn't believe it either because I actually
like board game community is big on that, and also games, because this is an audience that you know is already going to be engaged in what you're offering. Yeah. So this is, you know, build your crowd, right?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm bad about, like, when I get emails like that, I delete them, so I was like, no one's reading these, and then when I actually looked at the data, I was like, holy shit, like, you know, a lot of my funding's coming from, you know, the people from my newsletter, so people do, they read the emails, and like you said, it's people who have faith in you, who've been following along with you, who've seen the project before, so it's not their first time, they know what you're putting out there, those are the people who are going to come back and be a part of your project. So, you know, another post I did on my blog was how do you build that newsletter? And there's a lot of, I think, good tips, things I did, but really it was start small, right? Like, you know, your email starts with like 25, 30 people, and it's like your family, your close friends, the local ROC Game Dev group, people you've shown your game to around here, is really where you start. And then just getting out there, demoing your game wherever you can, whether it's a video game or a board game, getting eyes on it is really the best way to get anyone to interact with it. So just going to shows, local cons. I mean, we have our local game dev events here, the Maker Fair. There are events in Buffalo, Syracuse that are about an hour away. You know, if you want to make it work, you got to put in that legwork to like go to those places, go to Q's Con and you know, all those different cons that are, you know, just throughout Western New York, just to get your game out there and seen. Right.
And a lot of it's about building up snowball momentum, because one thing by itself, you know, isn't going to start that avalanche. But the more you do, the more you do, the more you do, the more you get used to it, and also, you know, the more, I guess, buzz, more momentum that you generate, you know, for your snowball, right? And eventually, you get that avalanche.
And so, right from the start, when you're going to start showing stuff, whether it's in person or online, create a landing page is my other thing. Yeah. It's like once you have one piece of art or the title, put it up there with a spot for people to sign up for your newsletter. Because it's like as soon as you're sharing it, you might have even 1 or 2 people, and that's it, that want to sign up for it. But if you don't have a place for them to sign up for it, then you've just lost those 2 people, and that work was for nothing. So it's like, have that landing page ready to go, and you can make it better as you get more art or new things. But just somewhere, have a place that people can sign up for it. Whether it's even on your phone, having the MailChimp app, and people can sign up for it right there. But get your, you know, MailChimp account going, and have a landing page. You can make one through MailChimp. So if you don't have your own website, they'll do it for you, and they just have in your newsletter, create a landing page. And, you know, it's pretty straightforward. So having that available, because when you're showing your game and people want to sign up for it, you need a place for them to do that.
Right. This wasn't a paid endorsement by MailChimp, but they are a really good service.
No, that's
for
what
this.
I use, and they're free for the first couple thousand.
Yeah.
First couple thousand subscribers, so it's great because it's free, it's easy to use. I'm really bad with stuff like that, and I can use it pretty well, so I highly recommend that more than others just because I use it. And then, so then the next thing is like posting art and exciting info, right? If you have game rules coming out or like cool snippets of the game in action, share those pictures. New artwork. Artwork really sells everything these days, so getting good art and sharing it early and often is huge. And then linking that landing page, so it's like, here's great art for our game. The game's coming soon, sign up here. And just do that whenever you post about it. Be sure to link somewhere people can follow along. But the more you show it, the more it's going to get out there, and the more your audience will grow.
Same thing with newsletter. People can forward it. They can refer back to it. Include a couple screenshots, a couple clips of art. And again, you just get that snowball rolling.
Yep. And then, yeah, we have like join online forums and groups. So there's a lot of Kickstarter advice groups that we've joined through the years, but with like video game dev as well. There's a lot of Discords and places you can go to meet people and start contributing yourself to the community. And I always recommend do this way in advance. Right. So don't just pop in and be like, I have a Kickstarter next month. Let me help you out, and you help me out. It's like you got to be a part of it for a year, 2 years before people know you and they want to be a part of what you're doing as well.
Right. Actually be in the community. Like, don't go and AstroTurf, right? Don't go and shill your product. Like, you actually should be a member of that community before you say, hey, can you look at my stuff too?
Yeah.
Yep. Make sure you're contributing positively, right?
Yep. And then, I love the idea of funding a small game first. I did that too, a small card game. Yep, and it's really like, it's really simple. You learn logistics. Well, for board games at least, it's physical. You learn to, fulfill the games, to ship them out, doing all the logistics of the whole campaign. But you also build that community. You have people of faith that you're going to deliver a product. And even if it's like 80 people who back you, and that's enough to fund it, that's 80 people who probably will come back your next game as long as you did a good job with the first game. And so really it starts small, and then you can kind of aim big once you've really gotten your feet on the ground gotten that audience, gotten the experience, and done that.
Right. So I mean, in the digital realm, like your first game on Kickstarter shouldn't be like science-based dragon MMO, right? It should be like a smaller project, something that you can tackle that bite-sized, especially depending on the size of the team, right? So don't go crazy. I mean, I know you guys have a lot of great ideas, but especially if your goal is to build your community, you start small and then build from there.
Yep. Another one is, I suggest, for board games at least, I don't know, for video games how much it works, but running giveaways on sites with built-in audiences, right? Give away your games, give away other really popular games that might be hard to get or something like that. And entries to win that prize is sign up for your newsletter, follow your Twitter account, like your company page on Facebook, things of that nature. So people to enter this contest start following you, and then as those people are following you, then start doing more of your art posts so that they see your game before they decide to unfollow you later after the contest is over. But once they start seeing your product, they'll start connecting with you and be like, yeah, this is something I might want to follow along with.
Right.
And if they do jump ship, that's okay too, because you don't want people really following you, giving you false hope that aren't interested in your product as well. But part of it is to connect with them in the first place so that you can hook them into what your product is, and if they might be interested.
Yep.
And then, like I said, the last thing is don't expect results overnight. It took me years and years to build an audience. And my first newsletter, when it first launched, was somewhere around 200 people, and now it's a couple thousand, right? And so it's just years of running Kickstarters, doing these giveaways, sharing art, and doing all of these things all the time for many years. And so it's just small steps, but you'll get there,
Yep. Good. All right. So the next step is, after you've established your audience, the next part of your audience, the next tier of your audience is reviewers. So you want to make sure you find reviewers that are actually going to appreciate your game, right? Don't go to like a fighting game community and show them like your sim game, right? They're not going to care. They're not going to review it. They're probably not even going to answer your email. So make sure you find those reviewers. Just because like it's a big name, it doesn't matter. Like you have to know, what that person likes, right? What kind of games they're going to like. Are they going to enjoy your game? And then you should find those reviewers who are going to give it a good, give it a fair shake. Those are your bullets.
Yeah, that was the main thing. And there's even if the reviewer isn't going to necessarily bring an audience to your game, like you might say, oh, this reviewer is going to bring me 10, 15, 20 backers. In reality, a lot of reviewers are going to bring you 1 or 2. And that's okay, though, because there's really an unseen metric. That's this third-party confidence, right? You've gotten reviews. They said the game's good. So then people who look at your Kickstarter page after, even if they didn't watch the review or come from the reviewer's page, are going to be a little more confident in your product. It's just all these little things to make people really feel comfortable with the game you're selling. And so, it's just weeding you out from, there's so many games on Kickstarter, and you need to just make sure that you stand out, that you're a trustworthy developer, and that the game you're putting out is, tried and true. It's been through development, it's been through reviews, and that people are interested outside of you and your close friends. Right. And so all these things, even like I said, if they don't directly send backers to you, are going to help you get backers as well.
Yeah, just think about your own Kickstarter backer habits too, right? When you go to a campaign, if you see something that it looks interesting, but there's no reviews or 1 review from someone you've never heard of, I usually skip those. But if I see, a couple of reviewers from someone I recognize or someone whose name I trust, or the website, or it's Kotaku, Polygon, like something I've recognized, I'm like, okay, let's seriously look at that. And so while that reviewer didn't directly refer me to backing that campaign, it got me to take it seriously, which Dan says like that's hidden metric.
Yeah, and a lot of them I won't even watch the reviews, right? Like, but you see the run there, and you're like, oh, okay.
I just need the blurb,
good.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
Yep. All right, have a social media presence, even if you're not good at it. I know. There's other social media sites. Dan mentioned Discord, which I know.
Twitch.
Twitch is big for video games, obviously too. Even if you're not good at it, you do need to maintain that presence. That's how you build your crowd. And for me, I'm terrible at it. Again, that's why I started working with Dan. You can grow your team. You don't have to do it yourself.
Yeah, and that's why I've been doing this for a long time, but this campaign was our most successful, and I think it's because we both had different strengths, and we started working together, and we had a project we were really excited for, and we put everything we had into it. And I think, like you said, it's just working as a team, and we built a team of designers and artists that we were really excited about, and it all came together really well, and it was not just like a single person doing everything.
Yeah, and that stuff, sure, it can be done. Like you have like some successes like Stardew Valley, right? That's like basically one guy, right? But how many of those are there, right? Like that's it. right? The one-man teams, like Dwarf Fortress is maybe another one too, but like they're very limited. Like that's that's lightning in a bottle, and don't plan on that, right? This is the one that we hear all the time as veteran designers. Like, nobody's going to steal your game design idea. Like, they're not. Like, because they have to put in the work, right? Like, an idea is great, but honestly, it's not going to get you there. The old quote is, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, right? We all probably have at least one great game design idea right now, right? You could, on a napkin, write it out. But what's that going to get you, right? You got a napkin you can't use as a napkin anymore. But if you develop that idea and then you bring it to like a playable state, okay, now you've got something. So nobody's going to steal your napkin idea, right?
And yeah, and as a publisher too, I mean, I have so many ideas that I want to publish myself, and so many projects that I'm like booked through the end of this year and part of next year. I can't take the time to steal someone else's idea too and grow that in-house, an undeveloped idea. That's not how it works, and the communities are so small, and I'm sure the video game community is similar in that a lot of people know each other, and a lot of publishers know each other, that it's pretty clear, like designers start posting their stuff, and then the publisher all of a sudden has that game that they're publishing, not with that designer. Your name gets smeared pretty quickly and pretty easily through the community. And so I find it's better to be trustworthy with people, share your stuff early. I used to be really hesitant with sharing our games that were coming out early, and now I do it the second I start having anything.
You have something to show.
Yeah, because that just builds your audience. Like I said, sharing the art and sharing the game action shots is really what drives people to have an interest in your game. And so we try really hard to share it as early and as often as possible.
And sometimes things do develop in parallel or concurrently. You see it in like Hollywood or in games where things with similar themes come out. They're not the exact same game, but the napkin idea was the same, right? They just branched very differently and became very different products. So again, don't be afraid to share that idea. This is specific to digital realm. Like cloning is a real threat, but congratulations. If your game got cloned, you won, right? You already succeeded. Your game was good enough to get stolen, right? Some guy did a third-party version of it. Great. So if you got cloned, great. I mean, that sucks, and you'll be mad about it. But that means you already made it, right? You already made a game that was successful enough to get cloned. So I wouldn't sweat that either. So, and again, there are a dozen Slay the Spire clones, right? But there's only one Slay the Spire. Like, I'm still playing that game, right? They just came out with a new character, so I'm still playing it. Yep.
You're kind of standing.
Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it's okay. There's not a lot of space up here.
We'll share this online too afterwards. Yeah. So don't. If you, I'll post it to the group. And also Dark Souls, right? Everyone's like, this is the Dark Souls of 3D frog combat, whatever. But I mean, there's only really one Dark Souls, right? Or Soulsborne games like Bloodborne and Sekiro, right? So everyone still knows the original, even though there are mini games like the new Star Wars game that's similar, but it's not Dark Souls. Oh, thanks. All right, this is another big one.
Yep, building your campaign months in advance. For a lot of different reasons. First is, scrambling the month or weeks before you launch. You're going to be scrambling no matter what you do, but if you can start getting your page done early and you can then start adjusting how you do things, you can kind of build it in tandem with how you're developing things. Right. It's just going to be a more fluid process. It's going to take some stress off you in that final 48 hours
right.
before you launch, when you're going to be worrying about your marketing or your getting your newsletter together and writing that. The last thing you want to be doing is building that page as well.
Right.
And for us, a lot of times we get reviewer quotes the day before we're going to launch, so we already have to build those and put those on the page. Building another the whole page while you're doing that is really, really hard. So that's the first thing. Is it's a lot of work. So the earliest, even if you start a bare bones parentheticals, that's what I do, is header title goes here, main description, and I don't even put everything in yet, but I just have my outline, and then I can build it as I come up with the description or build the images. It's a lot easier to go back and do that than just scrambling and doing it all at the last minute.
Right, and that means getting started. Like Adventure Tactics, I think we did a year in it. We started a year in advance of launching the campaign. So that's how much work, if you're really serious about your Kickstarter campaign, goes into it. Some people do a fly by your seat of your pants, but and some of them are successful. But my take is if they had actually spent more time with it, how much better could it have done, right? like even better.
And the other good reason for doing it is if you have a really solid page done early, like I said about sharing a landing page for people to sign up, if they're ready to see more about your game and you can share the campaign page, that's even more helpful because then they can click like notify me on launch, they've seen your reward tiers, and they're even more sold, you know, than just going into it blind. But what you want to do is make sure you share it when it's like legitimately ready, because if you have maybe some of your pricing's off or things that might actually sway backers' minds, or they can't see something fully. And you know, even if you put how to play video goes here so they know it's coming, but if they don't see anything and they're like, oh, there are no spots for reviews and they haven't even thought about this, that might turn them away. So you want to share the campaign page early, but you want to do it when it's like ready and actually shareable. It's sensitive. And not going to turn people away like, oh, something's missing and they don't want to come back. Because a lot of people sometimes, it takes them 3 or 4 times to see it and then back it. But if the first time they see it and they're not interested, they're not coming back. Right. So, you know, it's kind of this double-edged sword. You want to share it early and often, but you want it to be done and ready.
Also be prepared to accept critical feedback, especially on the internet where people are behind anonymity sometimes. Some people will poop on your page for no reason. And that happened with Adventure Tactics too. But some of the feedback was also really, really good. And so it was like 2 months out and we did retooling of some of the campaign because they provided excellent feedback. So just because you've been working on it for a year, and same thing with your actual game design too, right? Don't be afraid, don't close yourself off to valid, critical feedback. Not all feedback, but valid criticism. So this is big in the tabletop space. It's 100% true in tabletop. Your game pretty much has to be almost print ready in the tabletop world. But in the video game world, on Kickstarter, you should have some kind of playable demo, whether that's on itch.io or you're offering it for download somewhere, or it's an HTML5 web version that they can play. You want to make sure you have that demo. I mean, how many of you have been seeing those campaigns where it's like some really slick art and graphics, some really nice animations, but then it turns up being vaporware like 2 years later, right? And like, because the guy was just an animator, he wasn't a coder, right? There's just really awesome attack animations, but there was no actual game. So Kickstarter backers are starting to get savvy to that. So if you don't have a demo, they're going to pass. So, and again, if you're interested in tabletop, like Adventure Tactics, which I brought in if you want to take a look later, it has to be mostly print ready. You have to be ready to go because the tabletop space is actually kind of the most advanced in terms of Kickstarter and in terms of what the audience is expecting when they go to your page.
And
yeah.
So would you say this is comparable to reviews where it doesn't necessarily matter how many people play your demo, but having one is very important?
Yes, absolutely.
Please repeat the question.
He asked, is this similar to what we were saying about reviews, where it's not necessarily that they play the demo for to play the game and know they love it. It's more to have proof of concept that you're doing the work, you know what you're doing, and you're making a playable game that you're going to see through to the end. And I think, I mean, I think it's a lot of those things, right? I think, so like he said, the tabletop Kickstarters are really competitive. There's, I mean, so many campaigns launching every month, and you need to stand out. So that's why for us, having really, really good art, having everything almost done is really, really important. Just because, and for Tactics, this was really a lot of pressure because it was also a $100 game. So not only were we asking people to get in on our game, we were asking them to invest a lot of money early. And so we needed a lot of proof of concept because who was going to blindly throw $100 at us? Like, yes, we had games before, but nothing this big. And so this was really, I don't want to say a reach for us, but it was like we were really pushing the limits for how much we had ever done before. We had never done minis. There's over 800 cards in the game. There's, a choose your own adventure campaign guide that's 77 pages. I mean, it was just a lot of different, facets to this game that we had just never really done before. So we wanted to show that we had done our due diligence. We knew what we were doing with it. We knew we could handle it, and that we would, actually make the game, and it wouldn't be $100 lost for our backers.
And that ties into an earlier point: start small, right? I guarantee you, if this is the first Kickstarter campaign or game design that Dan and I worked on, we would have messed it up multiple times along the way. But because of the experience that we had, and both in design and running Kickstarter, that really helped us launch with a bigger game.
Mm-hmm. And one thing, I don't think we have any slide on this. Don't be afraid to realize what you can't do well and find people who can. Like Nick said, working with a team. So we both did a lot of things that we know we do really well, but we both like I can do social media, like managing it, but I suck at marketing and like copy editing and like writing my newsletters. I feel like the wording isn't very well. So we actually paid someone to do just the marketing and build up for our campaign. She wrote a lot of our copy editing. She reached out to reviewers and organized and coordinated all of that, which was huge for us because we had a lot of other things to do. She took a lot of burden off our shoulder, and she did it, I think, better than we would have done it. So that just helps for your campaign to do better as well, is like really realize what you don't do well and find someone who can do that specific thing well.
And I was kind of like the naysayer on that. Like, I don't know, do we really need someone? And she ended up being worth her weight in gold. Like, absolutely, she was like, because she's a subject matter expert in that realm, which you know, Dan is good at it. He's proficient, but you know, he wasn't like. Gold.
And also, we knew this campaign would get a lot of backers, and we're just like he said, we have kids, we have full-time jobs, and we're like, we can't handle all of this all just ourselves. So having an extra person who could share that burden, she could share it online when we couldn't, or she could answer some backer questions when we couldn't, was super helpful just because it was just an extra set of hands to help with that.
Yeah, and this is kind of getting up the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Related to that, how do you go about locating somebody with that skill set?
Again, it's just like he said, being online in social media groups and different collaboratives. I mean, for her, I noticed she did social management for another indie publisher, and she did a pretty good job with it, and I knew she was offering Kickstarter services. So I reached out to her. We Skyped a couple times to make sure it was a good fit. And actually, we had a phone call yesterday, and she's going to probably take on another collaborative project with me in the future, too. And I mean, she was fantastic. So it was more just being out there. She and I never really interacted much before that, but I'd seen her posting about things and being with another company, and I knew she did a pretty good job with it. So it was really just, you know, finding her and connecting and, you know, working on that way.
This is sort of related but unrelated, but how exactly can you get your hands on a dev kit for like the modern console systems?
Okay, so he asked how to get dev kits, but I mean, you would have to apply to, you know, Nintendo Switch. You know, you'd email Nintendo, and they have specific programs to do that. But I mean, you just contact those actual companies and said you know, and sign up for a dev kit. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, I mean, yeah, you definitely want to do that if you're serious about, you know, going to Kickstarter. Make sure you have you know, something that can run on a console. I mean, but for a simpler game like an HTML5, like if you have like a web version you can share on itch.io, that's fine too. But if you want to be on consoles, you know, you should have a, you know, provable proof of concept. Yeah.
And do you have to like pay into like, you know, anything like a Sony PlayStation 4 or 5 dev kit or Xbox One?
Yeah, I mean, those dev kits all cost money, so yeah, I mean, there is an investment to it. But if you're serious about it, you know, you pony up for it. So, yeah, I mean, we paid, because we wanted to have it ready, we paid for a lot of art, we paid for a lot of graphic design. That was thousands of dollars, but because we were serious about it, yeah, tens of thousands of dollars, if we're being honest. But it was worth it, because, you know, we got it back on the campaign. Yeah. But, you know, that's, you know,
but it's a big risk. I mean, it is a big risk.
Our friend Travis, who owns Millennium Games, always says, "Scared money don't make money." Right? That's his old like cliched saying. And that, in some cases, that's true. But nobody's saying you have to go on a limb and take a loan out for $10,000. But again, that's because we had built our way up to it. Right? Yeah. We weren't This wasn't our first campaign. Like, I wouldn't have done that, and my wife would have been really mad if that was our first Kickstarter campaign. Right? Yeah. But yeah, great questions. So, I mean, this ties into a little bit what we're talking about, you know, having a strong review-ready prototype versus an early prototype. So you can see, you know, the top photo is Adventure Tactics, like, while I was still developing it. Like, everything's still handwritten. I'm using stand-in minis from, like, another game. And then at the bottom, you can see the actual product, which is, you know, 90% done and ready for print. And the digital, digitally, this is what you should have when you're going for Kickstarter. You don't want the handwritten card, you know, digital equivalent. You want to have mostly complete graphic design, UI, you know. It can, I mean, even if it's only just like a level or two, but that level or two should be polished. Like that should be shining, right? It should be a polished gemstone, not like a rough one level.
Yeah, and I know it's a little different, but another one of my posts that I did on my blog was how much art is enough art. And so for board games, it's a little different, but it kind of relates in that it's like having a complete box, having at least one of each component, And again, this is shareable so people can see what the art's going to be like, what the graphic design is going to be like, that you've actually moved forward with moving on with that. And so they know the art's coming and they can see this is going to be done. So like Nick said, if you have like one playable level that's like completely polished, even if everything else is a little less up to par than that level, they know what you're going to be going towards. And you make a note saying, you know, the only one complete is this level, but everything else will be like that when complete. Right.
And we did it for Adventure Tactics too. Tabletop Simulator, if you guys are familiar with that. We shared the first 3 encounters in Adventure Tactics on Tabletop Simulator for free, and we're like, hey, test it out. So everyone, you know, even for a board game, you know, you can try it out for free. So there are, again, itch.io and all your other, you know, all the other websites that will allow you to host a game on there. You know, that's how you get your game out there and get people to pay attention to it and try it, right?
Yep.
So once you have that hook, make sure you're hooking them.
When it comes to like trademarks and service marks, you know, what steps do you take, and are they like different tiers?
I mean, it depends. You're asking about trademarks for your intellectual property, or just the game in general, or? Yeah. I mean, you have natural creator rights just by making it. Once you get to a certain threshold, that's when you start bringing in lawyers. But I don't want to say don't worry about it for your first small project, but you're probably not going to need like, you know, $1,000 an hour lawyer for your first game.
Yeah, and for a lot of
Studio name or like any kind of like company.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you
LLC.
you should register a company, yes, especially LLC, limited liability corp. So you know, if something goes bad, you're not paying out. You're not going bank. You don't have to declare bankruptcy afterwards, right?
Yeah, so that was the first thing I did when I was launching. Well, it was really my second campaign, but it was the first one that was kind of my mainstream game. Was I founded an LLC just to kind of separate my business funds and everything from my personal funds. As far as trademarks and copyrights go, so for board games, you know, it's going to be again a little different, but you know, it's really hard for board games because it's very expensive. The margins on games are small, so that's a first hurdle right there. But like Nick said, as soon as you publish things out there, online or in print, you have natural creators' rights. But then again, if someone steals it, then you have to take them to court and pay to do that, which again is going to be really expensive, and it's rare. And there's actually been cases where people have straight up stolen board games and then the original creator lost it anyway, if you saw Bang when they did that. And so it's really hard because you don't have a lot of rights. You can't really patent any of the mechanics. You can copyright like the actual copy you put in the game and the art, but that doesn't copy any of the mechanics in the game. So someone can take your exact game, just change the art, change the wording on it, even with the same rules, and just change the wording a little bit, and they're not doing anything technically illegal.
Right.
So it's really expensive and kind of not worth it in the board game world because you can't battle it in court. It's too expensive, and you're not going to make back any of the money you spend in court, and you're probably going to lose it anyway. But it doesn't happen. Like, it doesn't happen that often, as Nick said. Right. So we don't have a lot of people stealing each other's ideas in the industry. But I don't know if video games. Well, I mean,
video games are a little different because same thing. Like, you can copyright your characters, right? But you can't copyright first-person shooter. You know, and also, even if you have something exactly laid out, as long as someone didn't copy your code, they could reverse engineer, you know, exactly how your game works, right? You could build Halo basically, right, from the ground up. And obviously, it's not going to have Master Chief or whatever, but you could have that same engine, and Bungie couldn't do anything, or Microsoft now couldn't do anything about it because you reverse engineered it. You built it from the ground up, right?
Source codes, yeah.
Yeah.
And not only that, how much does like an LLC cost, and you know, what is the benefit of that?
Sure.
Something like service mark,
so
or like a full trademark.
In New York State, remember back, so I did this 5 or 6 years ago. I think in total it was maybe $500 total, and that's it. And it's like kind of one time founding it. Other states have like yearly fees you have to pay, things of that nature. New York doesn't. Once you found it, that's it. And so it was, I think, about $500. You have to register it, publish articles in a new newspaper announcing your LLC. It basically says this company is founded and located at this address. But all of that in total, publishing in the newspaper and everything cost, it was like about $500. The reason that was good, you get your own federal EIN number, so you're kind of separating it from your social security number. You can found bank accounts under the business and not yourself, credit cards as well. And then if people come for the company, it's basically coming out of the company funds, and you can't get sued basically for your house through things through the company.
Right.
And so it's kind of separating you from your entity. And so that's the good reason to do it. Especially too with board games, you have other things like, you know, if someone thinks you stole their idea, even if you didn't, or if a kid chokes on your product or parts, you kind of want the business separate from your own personal funds. And so that was why it was important for me to do it pretty early on.
Yeah, I heard there was this Shroud of the Avatar thing. There's some drama between like the player base and Richard Garriott, and that, you know, allegedly they put the game and dumped it into an LLC to shirk responsibilities from like, you know, working on it, and it just got like canned.
Right. So I mean that's an example of a Kickstarter campaign you should be wary of, where they don't necessarily have a deliverable product. I mean that time they were banking on Richard Garriott's name, right? Everybody, I mean, back in the day, everyone knew Lord British, right? Ultima, but they ended up having like kind of minimal involvement at the end. So you have to be careful. And also, Mighty Number 9, right? The Mega Man one, like they're like, oh, the Mega Man guy's on there, and then like they didn't have a proof of concept, and the game ended up being like not even close to what they promised. So that's why having a demo is great. So, so kind of returning gears to this, the planning stages, make sure you have a couple of different plans, right? You have contingency plan for if you succeed, if you fail, and I didn't put it on here, also if you super succeed. You know, a lot of people are like, oh man, my game is amazing, it's gonna make $100,000 on Kickstarter. I thought that every time, and finally it happened, but you know, the first couple times it didn't. So, but you have to have that plan for each one, especially failure. And it's okay to fail on Kickstarter, because a lot of times you'll help build your audience. Because they're like, okay, well, we got halfway there, but you got a lot of feedback saying, okay, these are the things I can improve, these are things in the campaign I can improve, these are things in the game I can improve. And that can lead to a future success. Like Dan actually relaunched his first campaign.
Yeah, my first mainstream game failed the first time, and it was really like I was building my first audience, and it was a family game on Kickstarter, which is a little harder as well. But having it out there and getting it quasi-funded with backers before failing had all those people ready to back it when I relaunched it, and they were all there first day, and then I built a whole new audience through the second campaign, and so it really helped me to grow that way. And like you said too, if you super succeed, like you might think that's awesome, but you know, especially for physical things as well, like board games, you have to print way more games, you have to fulfill way more games, which take a lot longer, cost, you know, have a lot more logistics you have to deal with. So it could delay your game, it could have issues with getting it all completed. And although that's great and you'll eventually get there, you may be delayed, and then, you know, your backers get pissed off because you're delayed a lot, or things that you didn't plan because you were like, oh, I'm only going to do okay, and then you get 3,000 backers and you're like, holy crap, what do I do with all this? Or you get, with 3,000 backers, you're going to get like 10 messages at minimum a day, and you're going to have to be playing customer service coordinator all day, every day, because you've got so many backers. And, you know, it's great. They ask a lot of good questions and they want to know a lot about your game, but it's very, you know, overwhelming with how much, you know, requests you're going to get from your backers. If you have a really successful campaign, you're going to get even more, and it's going to be really hard to manage all of that yourself.
Right. And also, you know, you have to plan out the stretch goals too, if you become very successful. So you want to at least, you know, have some idea where I'm going to go if things blow up. You know, fingers crossed they do. But then you have a plan for it. You're ready for it.
I know, because I follow the Essential Tactics Kickstarter quite a bit. As, if I remember correctly, as stretch goals were reached, they were released in batches of like 3 or 4. How far ahead were you planning those stretch goals? Was that
We had them all planned out, up to like 200,000, something, yeah.
And some of them, you know the price you could unlock them, but there's some wiggle room, because stretch goals do a couple things. One, it makes the game better for everyone. And two, you keep it about what you can afford to add them, but it's also a huge marketing technique as well, because when people see you have unlocked something really neat, not only do they get more excited for it, but you can then post about it without kind of being spammy. Instead of being like, my campaign's still live, you're like, hey, my campaign just unlocked this really cool new like metal coins or something like that. And so it's not really being spammy, you're just saying something exciting that happened, and then people are like, oh, that is really cool, and then they'll go check it out again. So kind of unlocking them in batches gave us wiggle room. Again, for you don't know how fast funding is gonna go, and if you unlock all of them the first day, you lose all the momentum you could have had through the campaign, and that's dangerous as well. But if you also have ones way out that you're never going to reach, people get disappointed and they're like, that would have been cool, but we're never going to hit that. So you really want them timed to unlock at reasonable levels through the campaign at points you can afford them. But we planned out too for really big success as well. And we were like, oh, if we hit 200,000, we'll unlock this. We didn't share it with anyone, but we had a plan in case that happened.
It's a long stretch goal. You know, some campaigns have, you can see where the stretch goal numbers are, but you don't know what it is, and some campaigns you do know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had experience with both?
Yeah, I mean, we've run them both ways, but I think the one that Dan outlined is the best. So he asked, how to lay out your stretch goals, and I think it is best to have like 2 or 3 to show, okay, we've got some. These are the levels for those, and you can say this first one. You tell them what it is, so you're like, oh, okay, shiny coins. Let's all fight for that one, and then as soon as you hit that one, you start revealing the other ones in the tier. And that gives you some wiggle room, because especially if mega success, like you're doing better than you want, you don't want, as Dan said, you don't want to blow through all your stretch goals in the first day, and then you're like, oh man, now I don't have anything to keep that momentum rolling.
Yeah, and what's also awesome is we had a lot of backers trying to guess what they were. So we blurred out images of future ones. So we'd have 3 revealed that we were going to unlock, and then we'd have 3 blurred what's coming next. And they'd be like, what do you think that is? That looks like the shape of this. That's probably this. Right. And so it just added interaction with the community as well. Whenever we'd post an update, they would be commenting in it, trying to guess what was coming, or I really hope it's this. And then they'd hope for something, and I'd be like, oh, well, while we have some time unlocking these, I'll get a quote from the printer to see how much that would cost to add.
Right.
And so, we also took some of their guesses and use them as feedback, and we added a couple of stretch goals in the campaign
based
we
on
weren't
what they
planning,
wanted,
based on that. And because it was like, well, we saw what they were excited for, and then we didn't tell them we weren't planning it, and then all of a sudden we were like, oh, we're unlocking this. They're like, that's awesome, that's what we were talking about. And I was like, I know, like we kind of like planned that, And so I like doing it that way, so that you can, have some excitement with your backers, have a lot of interaction, and keeps the momentum rolling.
Right. The only downside to that is you have to be a little more glued into your campaign while it's running. But I think it is a more versatile approach and allows you to be more flexible.
Yeah, we would have to prepare images for, okay, if this unlocks overnight, when I wake up at 6:30 in the morning before I go to work, I have to post an update, I have to add all the new images to the campaign, swap everything out. And so, I'd write the update early, get the images all ready, and then if it didn't unlock, I'd have to go to work and be like, okay, well, when this unlocks, and sometimes I'd send it to Nick and I'd be like, can you publish the new updated page or this and that? And, stay on top of it, because once it unlocks, people are then like, well, it unlocked, why didn't you show what's next or something? And, then they get disappointed again. So it's really a lot of management with making sure you're just communicating well. That's the other thing, is always communicate well with your backers. And no matter what, whether things are going well or bad, they'll appreciate that. Yeah.
And that also reinforces the team concept. Like, I'm a night owl and Dan's an early bird, so we could kind of do those shifts, monitoring the campaign and answering questions. And when you have a big one, there are literally thousands of comments on the Tactics campaign page. So, we've responded to most of them. Mostly all of them.
Almost everyone, yeah.
Or we kind of batched responses, yeah.
Right. Or if there were some that we wanted to skip, because some people leave not great comments, you just ignore it. But luckily you get so many comments that people forget about it.
And also if you have a good backer community, they'll answer those. They'll address the bad actors for you.
Do you set aside time for your workday for that month, and how much of that?
Yep, that's a great question. So you asked if we set aside time, and I actually take off a couple of days. I always take off the first 2 days and the final 24 hours. And I'm lucky enough to work from home, so I could kind of spare some time.
Yeah, I always take off the day of launch at least. And then usually I try and end it at 10 p.m. so I can get out of work early on the day it ends, and I have all the end of the day to handle in the final day. But a lot of it is just, using my time wisely, if you're on breaks or you're on the potty or things like that, that's when you kind of handle answering comments or, whatever it might be. Or, I would just stay up later than normal, and I would get, 5 hours of sleep a night, just because I would be up later and I'd still have to get up at 6 to get my kids to school or something like that. So, you got to make sacrifices to make it work. But like he said too, we found teammates that we had opposite schedules, so it worked really well for us.
So since between the two of you have 5 kids, this is obviously a very stressful month, especially at the start and at the end. Just curious how you two kind of managed self-care and making sure that it was a relatively sustainable process.
That's a really great question. Sam asked about self-care. For me personally, and I think it's true for Dan too, because his wife is awesome, is that we have very supportive spouses who realize, and also this is not their first rodeo, because this is, as we said, we have over a dozen Kickstarter campaigns between us. And my wife is campaign is accurate, right? It's like running for office. It's a political campaign, because you have to be constantly glued to your phone. You're paying attention. You have to put out fires if they come up. You have to respond to questions, concerns. A campaign is a really accurate word for for when you run something on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever.
Yeah, and like you said, the whole teamwork thing. If there was a night I knew Nick was around and he was handling everything,
yeah, we did a lot of.
I would use that night to just pull away from it for a couple hours and make sure I did that. And so like I would just like get a movie and my wife and I would do that and like make a fun snack or something and just make those 2 hours we had before bed like worthwhile. On a night I knew he was handling it, and then I'd be like, okay, this was great, but tomorrow I'm going to be busy
it's his shift,
all night long, right? And you know, I just made it clear, and I communicated well, like these are the nights I'm going to be super busy, and if something comes up, I maybe even be busy before then. But we kind of set times where we could manage all of that. And then like there was a time during it where we ended up meeting out for lunch.
Yeah,
and it was kind of like a non-business, like let's just hang out and get lunch together.
Decompression
and again, it's
time,
that self-care, right? Because it's hard. We're good friends, but then we work together, and you need that time to still have your friend time because if we're always together working, we're going to lose our friendship. So we still set like play dates on the weekend with just our kids, and we don't talk a lot. We still talk some game, but we try and pull away from it because most of the time during the week when we're talking, it's all like business. And so you just have to really compartmentalize when you have fun personal time and make sure you do that. And when you're together, try and not bring up business really at all. And I think we found a good medium,
good balance,
like a balance of doing that.
But again, because I think we have a lot of experience, but we've kind of built up to having this big crazy project. But that also reminded me of the reviewers, because there were nights that sometimes we were triple booked doing interviews during the campaign. And that's a nice thing to line up to. And that's why you want to build out your campaign so far ahead of time. So you line up your interviews to go live during the campaign. So people who are listening to their normal podcasts, YouTube shows, Twitch shows, whatever they normally watch, those go live and push traffic to your campaign while it's going on.
Yeah, and I think we did good about, we would try and do all of them together, but like there was one day where we had 4 or 5 in 1 week, I think it was.
No, it was like 6.
Yeah, and we had 2 in one night. And I was just like, okay, Thursday, I just need the night off. So can you do that alone? And he was like, yeah, but Wednesday I'm busy. And I was like, cool. And so we found the ways to cover for each other. And, I think part of it is, like he said, we have experience. But we also trust each other a lot.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
We know the other one's going to do whatever they're doing really well. So like when he's doing it, I'm not there worrying like I need to take care of this or worry about this because I know it's in good hands and fine. And I think like that kind of goes without saying, but it's like really important that you have that. Is like the person you're working with, we trust each other a lot, I think. And so, and like we'll talk about things if we disagree on something, but we both know it's still in good hands.
Right. We've always reconciled those differences. And that's why building the right team is important. Yeah. Same thing like signing a contract, right? If someone doesn't want to sign a contract with you, that person's not your friend, they're trying to take advantage of you, right? Yeah. A friend can accept a contract, right? Yeah. Because they know it's just business. That's not your friendship. Yeah. So that's general contract advice for you guys.
And again, it's to help compartmentalize everything as well. Because if you just have these loose agreements during your time together when you're friends too, like it's kind of all blends into one, and we try and keep it all just completely separate as best we can.
So some Kickstarter facts. Tabletop games raised $176 million in 2019. Video games only raised $16 million last year, and that's a big change. And there was kind of, are you guys familiar with FIG? Yeah, so all the big marquee games went to FIG, so that's why there's no big money. And sometimes there's a drag-along effect, like that big game hits, and then all the other little campaigns get a boost because the video gamers are on Kickstarter looking for it. So those big marquee games are gone, so it is a little bit harder to find funding on Kickstarter the way it was 5 years ago. And also, again, backers are savvy, a lot more savvy now. A cool 2-minute fight animation, but not an actual demo. People are wise to that now too. So that's why, again, have a demo, have something playable. Indie games are still thriving on Kickstarter, though I don't want to scare you off of Kickstarter for video games. Indie games still have a very strong presence there, but it's not guaranteed money like it was 5 years ago for like very little effort, honestly. Because you look at if you look at the Kickstarter campaign pages and then you look at the tabletop ones, it's night and day. The tabletop ones are a lot more sophisticated and they're a lot closer to final product than a video game one, which might, honestly, if your scope is too big, you have huge scope creep, you're not planning on your stretch goals, you're 5 years out from the campaign. And a lot of them, I think the creators had good intentions when they started, but they never actually ended up delivering because they did a little bit better than they thought. They didn't plan for that success, and then they just kind of gave up. And they're like, okay, well, I'm never going to deliver the game. Sorry, no refunds.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of sad that, like he said, it's so polished that a lot of tabletop games, they say it's kind of switching towards almost like a pre-order system, and it's not. But it can feel like that because the games are pretty much almost print ready when that happens. But like for someone like me, I could never print any of the games without the Kickstarter campaign, right? That funding early is important. I can't initiate a print run. Like this game was super expensive to print, and we had to put a lot of money into it to begin with, but even without that, the game costs a lot of money to print, and there's no way we can make it exist without the Kickstarter campaign. So yes, the game was mostly done and ready to go, but that didn't mean we were ready to print it, and there was no way we could afford to print it. So we needed that Kickstarter campaign to fund the idea and the, you know, the beginning processes of this game. And there's no way we could get that going without Kickstarter. So, but tabletop games do feel like that because they're so close to done that it feels like you're just clicking a pre-order button, but a lot of them wouldn't be made without it, so.
And that goes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you're comparing the video game and the board game Kickstarter pages and that video game ones don't have nearly as much to show, right?
Yeah.
So if you did have like a river slice type demo, would you see that being more
That will really help you stand out, absolutely. Because a lot of the Kickstarter ones, like, they're very strong proof of concepts, but there's usually very little playable content on there. But so whenever I see a video game Kickstarter with a demo, I'm probably 10 times more interested in that campaign than I am another one, which I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll play that someday in 5 years when it's finally done. But, and also, right, having the demo shows that you're much closer to reality, right? Very good question.
Just real quick for people like me who aren't aware, what is FIG?
FIG is it's kind of creator-driven. Like Double Fine Productions was one of the first big ones. But you're basically buying kind of stock in that game, assuming it's going to do well. And a lot of the marquee games are going there because they're looking for bigger investors, not just Kickstarter. So but the Kickstarter community has kind of followed them there too, because they know that's where the AA, AAA games are going for their crowdfunding. But you kind of, it's almost like buying shares in the game. If it does well, you kind of get your shares back, or you just get the game if you put one in at like a low level. But it's a slightly different approach to crowdfunding that's a little bit closer to crowd venture capitalism, I guess, than crowdfunding from Kickstarter. Good question. All right.
So that's it?
Questions?
Yeah.
See my question. Yeah.
Unlimited questions. So just kind of on the broad scale, maybe you already have a post about this on that blog, but what does a general timeline, like scalable timeline for getting a Kickstarter up and running look like? So this is a game that
Sam asked about timelines.
Tactics. I know you mentioned you had a little bit of a timeline for like when do you start putting your campaign page together, but when do you send to reviewers, like stuff like that.
Yeah. So usually for games, you want the reviewers to have over a month, at least for tabletop games, to play it. They need to play it a couple times, they need to make videos, they need to edit it, and they have a huge list of games they have to do this for. So we want to get them the games at least a month in advance, which means we have to print them and send them to them at least a month before that, which means we have to have the art and graphic design done 2 to 3 months at the latest before we want to launch. And then in those 2 to 3 months leading up to launch is when we're coordinating all of our podcasts. So usually reviews I coordinate as early as when I know I'm launching, because you could just say, I'm launching something in 6 months, can I send it to you? And they'll be like, yeah, as long as you get it to me a month in advance. But like at least you know you've coordinated with them. But it varies, right? So Tactics took us a year and so to build.
Right. I mean, it was a skeleton at the beginning, but we started it, so we had an idea of where we wanted to put the pieces eventually.
But I collaborating with someone else on I think you played a demo of a different game that's 18 cards only, and we're launching another one, and we're planning on doing that in March, and we just kind of decided on it a week or two ago. And it's something we can throw together really fast. He has a lot of experience, and he's the graphic designer and artist, and it's very similar to a previous game we did, and we know the audience is there, so we don't need as much build up to it. And it's a $9 game, so it's kind of one of those, it's cheap buy-in. People will probably get in on it. The art's cute. It's not something where you have to prove that the investment of $100 a year in advance is worth it. It's $9, and there's already a pretty well-received predecessor to it. So we're just kind of putting the page together. And the reason we're doing it so quickly is we want to reprint the first game, and we don't want to wait on that. So we kind of want to do it all in tandem. So it's really important for us to get it done soon, right? So something like that you can throw together quick. So I guess, yeah, for us, it depends on the project and the scope of it and what your trying to accomplish with it. But yeah, it could be anywhere from 3 to 4 months from when you're ready to go to a year and a half.
But I mean, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah.
Dan has a ton of experience,
we have a lot of
so he
experience
can do
doing
it in a
this,
couple of months. But I mean, if your goal is $500, okay, fine. Your mom and like your best friends can fund that, right, on the first day. But I'm not talking about that, like the mom and pop campaign. This is like if you want to build up to it. But your first campaign should be smaller. I mean, not 500, but I wouldn't go more than $20,000, $50,000 for your first campaign, unless you have like a bigger project. But then if you have a bigger project like that, I would say, hey, scale it back. Do you have a smaller piece that, self-contained piece that you can do instead?
So is it possible to or advisable to run a one-off, if you don't plan on being like a long-term, small business or whatever? Is it possible to do like a one-off, register this game, that's all we're gonna do, and not do any Kickstarters after that?
Yeah, I mean, if you have an idea that sells, and again, proof of concept, a strong demo, I mean, that's very doable.
That's something I tell people all the time when they want to get into this is really the first thing you have to do before you do anything is decide on your goals, what you want. Do you want this game to get out there and be, played by a lot of people, or do you just want to fund it yourself and be in control of the business? Do you want to do multiple games or just one? Because that will affect how you do your Kickstarter, right? So for us, we typically have to do really large print runs if you want to save on costs, if you want to, get into distribution. There's a lot of things that go into it. So if you want to really do this, you need to fund higher, you need to print more games, you need to get more backers. If you want to just do a one-off game, your risk is smaller because you can print less games. You can just do it for that one game. You don't need to get into distribution because you're not funding your next game either after that. So you can kind of be a little more conservative on how many backers you need and what you're doing with it. So it really depends on what you want to do. But really, if your goal is you don't want to publish a lot of games and you want a lot of people to play it, pitching it, at least in board games, pitching it to publishers too. There are a lot of people who already have businesses, who have a community, who do this full time, that have that reach, that have that distribution. Pitch it. Don't be afraid to pitch it. Your game's still going to get out there. It's still going to get played. You're not the publisher, but that's okay.
You just saved yourself a ton of work.
Yeah, so really decide, and honestly, it'll pay better. So at least at board games, designers, they get the money and they're done. Publishers get the money and then they reinvest it in the next game or do this, and they pay all the graphic designers, and there's not a lot left after it, right? So it's really decide on your goals early and figure out what you really want to accomplish with this. Yeah. It's okay. We'll be here for a little bit.
We're still.
So we talked about kind of the value of community, of being a part of something and giving and taking with your community, and obviously at ROC Game Dev we believe in that.
Yeah.
But on the topic of hiring a marketing and PR person, not every indie has the means to. But if you're really serious about a large Kickstarter, is there a space within that Kickstarter community to hire a strategist to either meet with you and advise you, or to hire someone who will manage your campaign for you? Does that exist?
Yeah. So
Yes,
Sam was asking about hiring consultants. So I mean, you can hire them from different needs, right? The person we hired actually helped us manage. She was live during the campaign. But you could just hire someone. Say, hey, can we hire you as a consultant, a strategist? Here's our campaign. Here's our plan, or you can help them devise that approach, right? This is your strategy.
What was also nice was she broke it up into payments too, so it was a third leading up to the campaign, a third mid-campaign, and a third after the campaign, I think it was. So if we weren't going to fund, we could have been okay, let's stop doing this, and not had her work through the campaign and paid that final bit, right? You can find ways to make it so that it's a smaller risk, right? And then if you start funding it, you're yeah, we're going to afford this, let's keep doing this. But if it looks like your campaign's going to fail, you can kind of cut ties then.
Right,
and
cut your losses.
Yeah. So, there are ways you can do that. Like you said, for consultant, I mean, at least you guys, we would always be happy to meet extensively to get something going. We couldn't probably have the time to run a campaign, but we could do a lot of help with prep work and getting ready for that. And, we're always happy to do that.
I mean, and that's why we, said to do this, because, I mean, we're available to you as local resources.
And we'll do it for free.
Yeah.
Do you have a contact slide that you can?
Yeah, at the beginning. Probably,
Yeah. You got it, yeah.
You said a large amount of your backers came from your mailing list the first few days.
In the first day, yeah.
Once you've gotten that Kickstarter off the ground,
So during the rewards, you do surveys. I always ask, do you want to be added to our newsletter?
Okay.
And people who say no, then that's fine. And people who say yes, I add them right in. And that's the main way I do it. But then like on my website, I have a pop-up. So actually that helped a lot with tactics. Less with other games, but people were really interested in this one. Every time we posted about it, I'd get like 10 to 15 new subscribers. And it was just, I had a pop-up on the site I was sharing the stuff from, or I'd link it, in a post. And so, but really the conversion comes from once you have those backers and you do your reward survey, and you just say, do you want to join our newsletter for announcements on future releases and playtesting opportunities or something like that? And if they say yes, then great, and then you add them on.
And generally those are people who are already going to be engaged because they signed up specifically either for that product or they're a fan of like your brand, right?
But then it's important to do things well. I mean, it's always important to do things well, but like you want them to then get a good product so that they do want to come back for the next game. Because if they sign up and then you give them something that's really bad, they're going to be like, well, yeah, they're going to lose faith in you for the next game, right? So that's why, a lot of times too with some of my earlier games too, I spent more on quality of box and other things in the card stock, even if it was really stretching my budget, just because I knew I wanted to create a lasting brand, so I wanted people to come back for the next game. So I had to consider, the quality of the game, and everything else as well, because I just wanted to make sure people had faith in my company.
I was wondering, how often do you put out your newsletter? Is it weekly?
So you asked about newsletter cadence.
I do it as little as possible, just because I find people don't like being spammed much, and a lot of times when you post, people unsubscribe. So I really only try and do it when I have something launching, or like if I'm doing maybe a big sale at Christmas time or something like that, something really noteworthy. Most of my announcements I do either on Facebook or Twitter, like I have a game coming out. I won't necessarily do that in the newsletter unless I'm talking about something else as well. So I'll be like, oh, Kickstarter is launching, and in 6 months I have this game coming out, and this is happening or coming to retail. And I try and do it in as few newsletters a year as possible. So I do maybe 3-ish a year or less.
Yeah, I think once a quarter is probably good.
Yeah, I wouldn't go more than once a quarter, yeah. And I may be even more conservative than that.
Unless you were launching, some people it's possible launching more than that.
Yeah, there are some people who launch campaigns monthly, and so they'll do that, and that's fine. But just saying, oh, this game is releasing in 6 months, and then okay, in 3 months we're releasing this game. Now this game's live, and then it's like, okay, it's already live in 2 weeks in, and then okay, we're ending in a few days. Like, I mean, people hate that. So
I generally unsubscribe from those types of newsletters. Like, I'll sign up because I'm interested, but then I'm like, okay, never mind.
Yeah. So around the product launch, then, when would you?
I usually do it day of launch. I usually do it like 5 minutes after I hit the launch button. So I'll know I'm going to launch at, let's say, 8 a.m. And I schedule my newsletter to launch at 8:05 or something like that.
Right, and that way that helps you feed into that critical 30% that you need, 31% you need in the first 24 hours.
Yep,
or first 2 days,
I usually try and have it happen pretty early in the morning, earlier than that, so like 6 or 7 Eastern time. And that's because one, everyone here can, if they're looking before they go to work, they can check it out. People in Europe, it's about noon there or 1 o'clock. And so they're all awake. People in Asia, it's going to be 12 hours later, so that's 6 p.m. And so 6 to 7 a.m. around here is really a good time to notify people, because then everyone's awake throughout pretty much the world. They're at times that they could access it, and if they're not, they have those times coming. And so for me, that early time is really best.
Right.
If you do it at 3 p.m., it's almost bedtime in Europe, and it's in the middle of the night in Asia. And
right.
So that's why, I try and coordinate that for pretty early in the morning here.
And we didn't really cover it in the slides, but there are better days and times. Like Friday, 5 p.m., don't launch then, because people are heading after the weekend, they're going to forget, they're not going to check. So
don't launch around holidays, that's another one.
Holidays are tough unless your game is so good you can capture that market for the holiday season. But that means you have like a seriously killer product.
But most holidays, like people, even if it's just a long weekend holiday or something people don't really celebrate, they go away. So if you're away or with friends or family, you're not checking what campaigns typically are launching, and you're going to go back them. Or if it's like Thanksgiving and you're like sitting around the table, you're not gonna back anything. So backing around holidays or on the weekends, that's when people aren't doing things. They find most people, Tuesdays are really good, and Wednesdays and Thursdays, and that's because Monday, everyone's getting back to work and catching up on what they missed over the weekend. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, people futz around on their phone at work. And so like really that's what it is they have the time to actually back your campaign. So that's when they're accessible. I'm sorry, behind.
I've heard that January and February tend to be better months to start.
Yeah, so you asked about January and February. Right?
Yep, it's kind of going towards almost any time is a good and bad time to launch because there are people backing every month and there are campaigns launching every month, so it's actually good and bad. You know, sometimes though December they say can be really bad, but if you're the only campaign and it's a cheap game, you have less competition and you're kind of doing a smaller buy-in, you might do really, really well. So that can be helpful. January is good because it's after Christmas. You're after the buying season, but people might have gotten money for Christmas. There's a lot of hobby releases, so people are excited about games in January too. So there's a lot of reasons why that's good. Typically April and May are good, but then for us convention season hits in the summer, so people are a little more stingy with their money through the summer. But again, if you're the only campaign launching, I mean, at a con, you get a lot of people there, but there's still the rest of the world that's not at the con that's still able to back your game. So, you know, really any time now, because Kickstarter's grown so much, it's almost just when you're ready is the best time. When you can do it.
I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, people have said March and April because people are getting their tax returns, so they're more likely to spend. But again, I'd really like to reinforce Dan's points, like when your campaign is ready, when it's polished, when you're ready to show it to people. That's when it's time to launch.
So you mentioned that like we should have a clear plan when we're considering doing a Kickstarter, after whether it's a success or failure. So I was just wondering, like, do you have any tips to like plan like for after failure? Because like I'm just, like I've never done Kickstarter, so maybe this time I could like imagine that like if your Kickstarter is successful, then like you have a like really clear idea what to do. Like like it would be like, oh, like what are the things we have to do to turn that demo into a full game? But like if you fail, then like it may get like kind of shaky mental. Like it's like, oh, like do I have to start all over? Should I make another?
So the question was, if you fail,
Planning
how
for
do you
failure.
prepare for the future? And some of those things are, how far in advance do you want to relaunch it? Some of the things are, what can you change, right? So if for some reason tactics, when we were doing it, felt like it was just the buy-in, it was too expensive, or people were shy at the cost for what they were getting or something, we could plan maybe a more economical version that like was maybe not ideal for us, but something that maybe we could get more backers and lower our goal. You know, it's kind of our backup plan, but still have that plan, right? Or maybe cut the miniatures out of the campaign and just do standees only, because, you know, miniatures are like $10,000 just for the dies, and then, you know, the cost for them. So then we could seriously reduce our goal and our funding, you know, by removing them, but we didn't want to. So that's like our backup plan, right? So we had all these contingencies for if we fail, how are we going to reattack this if that happens? And so, yeah, it's really just planning, like, you know, when would you redo this? How would you redo this? What would you do differently to make it better? And really address the problems. Like, was it just you weren't conveying what you're selling, right? Like, if you're not conveying your game well, find better ways to express that and then do that. I had one campaign that was struggling, and I have another post on how getting a struggling campaign to succeed. And basically it was like, why is this campaign struggling? And I had to address the problems. And what I ended up doing was realizing people didn't realize like how like interesting the deduction aspect of the game was. So I posted like an online, not game, but like with some of the cards, letting them do the deduction themselves. And they were like, oh, that's really interesting. And like that kind of, so I wasn't really conveying the gameplay well. And so I realized that mid-campaign, I started addressing it. I started running contests with people answering the deduction problem, so that got more eyes on it. And then I used that to help fund my game, and it ended up funding. But, you know, it was kind of like deciding, what can I do to turn this around? And, you know, it's different depending on every game, but you really just have to sit and really look at it and be like, why is this failing?
Right. Yeah, you know, Dan touched on contingency planning, risk analysis. You know, those are the kind of things that you get with project management experience. And if you don't have that, Dan and I are here as a resource. If you want us to, like, can you look at my campaign? Can you give me some suggestions? Absolutely, I will do that for free.
Yep. And we'll do that before you launch too, so
Yep,
that you don't fail.
definitely,
But if you're failing, like, we'll
Yeah,
help with that as
and
well.
don't come to us the week before launch. Be like, hey, can you look at my campaign?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to have enough time to incorporate any major feedback if we have any. And people have asked us about it, but then like they're resistant to any of the suggestions we have, and they're like, okay, man, I try to help you.
Well, and even like you said, with the feedback we were getting for our campaign, some of it was like these sections aren't in a good spot or they don't convey the message well. So we had to redo graphics on a lot of images and move them around. Some people in the Kickstarter advice groups were in the day they're launching or the day before, they're like, how's my page? And it's like lists of things they need to readjust that you just can't do in a day. So that's why it's always important, like 3 months in advance, or just months in advance, getting eyes on it to start, and then like a month in advance getting eyes on the final campaign page, so that you can make those changes. Because really the feedback is there is like backers are telling you they're not getting something from your page.
Right.
You want to convey that to them better.
You've mentioned a few times that you have some blog posts available on the internet.
Yep.
Can I
So if you go to my website, which is just letzringgames.com, there's a more, I think, or other things type section. And like all the other stuff I do outside of just publishing my games is under that page, and they're there. Yeah.
So I also forgot to do an appendix, but like Jamie Stegmaier of Stonemeyer Games, like Viticulture, Scythe. If you go to Stonemeyer Games, he has an entire
His is unbelievable.
it's called Kickstarter Lessons. There's over 100 of them. I think he's up to like 150,
I mean,
something crazy. But I basically read all of those,
Yeah.
and that's how I learned how to do my first Kickstarter campaign, and it was good enough.
And it's funny because some of the suggestions have changed through the years,
Right.
but overall it's literally the best resource for Kickstarter prep and planning.
He does also
there
have a book
ever
too,
is.
like
Yeah.
a book on Kickstarter.
Yep.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks.
Oh.
One more question.
Yeah.
I may have missed it, but your blog, what was it called?
Oh, so it's Letterman's Lessons here.
Oh,
It's
okay.
hosted on another site called the Indie Game Report as well. But then I link that on my site, and so yeah.
So I mean, one thing you can tell from Dan talking about, like he's involved in a lot of communities. So that advice he was giving, like he lives that advice.
Yeah, I mean that site, it was like a collaborative review site, and basically we wanted content, but not the pressure to put content out every day. So 5 or 6 of us got together, and it was like some video reviewers, some written reviewers, I wrote some blogs, and it was all just so that way like we could each post one thing even bi-weekly, and that would be a lot of content because there were so many of us. And so it was just another small community where we were trying to put content out there and help people. Yeah.
Did I see a question in a minute? You guys good?
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
No stream questions?
Real quick before we disperse,
Nope.
please eat any leftover pizza and beverages. Don't leave them here. Also, please sign the sign-in sheet if you have not
I
already.
don't lose the cable.